Hello there, Core Club members. It's hard to believe, but we're deep into September, and that means the season's right around the corner. And as Ed and I have messaged to each of you over the last several weeks, we have started a mental game series to take us into the 2019-2020 season that we just can't stress enough the importance for each of you to dive into. Of course, we're a few weeks into that now, and I know we're really excited about today's guest, and we're fortunate to have with us Bob Tewksbury. I'm going to turn it over to Ed, and he'll give a formal introduction. But Bob, thanks on behalf of all the Core Club officials out there. We're really, really excited about this content. It's going to be very meaningful for all of us.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, it's great to have me.
Okay, listen, guys. We've done this, a lot of things in a lot of different areas. Just listen to me. This is, to me, one of the most important, if not the most important thing that we've presented to you in the 11 years that we've had Core Club. I believe strongly that this is a deal maker. And so we're going to pay a lot of attention to this, and today's guest is really important. I'm going to do a brief introduction, and we're going to jump in. You can certainly look him up and Google him, but I'm going to give you his book. It's called 90% Mental. It's a wonderful book. If you love baseball, it's phenomenal, and if you just want to get better at the mental game, it's terrific. I would really, I think I bought mine from Barnes & Noble. Got it within a few days, but I really want to recommend it. It's a really relevant read, is the way I would put it. And I jumped into it and kind of going back through it again and taking some more notes. So Bob Tewksbury pitched in the major leagues for 13 years, won 110 games, was a National League All-Star, was certainly well respected by all the teams that he played for, and that has transitioned his life. Took his master's at Boston University in sports psychology, and transitioned his life, and he jumped into the sports psychology field in 2013 with the Boston Red Sox. And you baseball fans know that was a world championship team. So, certainly a lot of success, and his book will tell you so much about the relationships that he built along the way. And so I want to kind of jump into what is really meaningful for us at Core Club. So Bob Tewksbury, I know that the Cubs, and now Bob is my connection is that we met behind the batting cage in Philadelphia when the Cubs were there, and I was introduced to Bob by my friend Joe Madden, who is really strong on mental skills, and I know he's a big supporter of the work that you're doing, Bob. Okay, so let's talk a little bit here. Let's jump in. Bob, first, thanks for being with us. And here's the deal. We have a lot of officials who really comprehend principles. I mean, we haven't given them the PhD level. We've given them as much material we've been able to get from the late Ken Ravizza, from Chris Carr, from Dr. Joel Fish. So, I mean, you're certainly an all-star with that group. But I talk to officials all the time about implementation. And I said, well, are you putting this stuff into practice, or do you practice the mental skills? So what's the magic deal here? How do we get to that so that we can implement and really make that the difference maker? So,
well, that's $1 million question. You can lead a horse to water, but how do you get him to drink it? And the implementation is the most difficult part, because you have to apply it on a regular basis. It's not a one-time thing, and I think that's where athletes sometimes look for the mental skills as being a quick fix to performance. I feel bad today, help me feel better today so I can play better now. Whereas I think what we're talking about in this case is longevity and consistency. And I think consistent routines lead to consistent performance. So implementation of this would be, the quick broad stroke of this, guys, would be, what is your daily routine? When can you implement a mental skills training component? What would that component be and why? And then, number one. Number two would be, for the individual to identify what areas they feel like they need to work on. Is it self-talk? Is it, the being overcritical? Is it perfectionism? Is it dealing with, like you had mentioned, pressure? Or working with partners that you don't really know. And So when you identify the performance issue that's in place, that's the obstacle, then you can implement a program to go around that. So the first step is identifying what's going on with the individual official, and then working on a program around that.
Okay. So here's what happens with our group. Very motivated. So they go to these camps in the summer, which essentially are tryout camps with the effort to get to the college level. Sometimes these are for Division II, Division III, sometimes, many times Division I. So there's a feeling like I got to go to this camp and nail it. Because if I nail it, because what happens is there's 100 referees there, and they're going to select 8 or 9. So they have to stand apart. They have to nail it. And I find they're talking to people a lot. It seems like they put an enormous amount of pressure on themselves in an effort to be perfect, so that the supervisor watches them and says, oh, I want to hire him or her. And many, many times that leads to not a good result.
Right. Well, I mean, my thing with that would be, perfectionism is something that we strive for, but realizing that it's really not attainable. As my late mentor Harvey Dorfman would say, if you can put 3 inches water in the bathtub and step in the bathtub and not touch the bottom, then you're perfect. And so, but I think, so that goes to, as you were talking about that, Ed, and if it was a baseball tryout, correct me if I'm wrong, but the people observing the officials aren't just looking for perfection. They're looking to see other qualities in the referee, the official, how he responds to a barking coach or a player, or there's got to be other behavioral things, not just the technical part of making the call, right?
Right. Well, you know what? I'll tell you, there's a thing I call it inner swagger. Many times they just look to see, like, does this official look like he belongs? Does he carry himself? Body language.
Sure.
How does he present himself? Because most of our communication and officiating, about 80% of it is nonverbal. So that comes from within. Again, am I deer in the headlights, or do I act like I've been here and I belong here?
Well, so the point is, what are the officials focusing on? If it's focusing on perfection of getting the call right all the time, and they're minimizing their affect, how people view them, how they're perceived, then they're focusing on the wrong stuff. I read a book by a Navy SEAL, former Navy SEAL, that's been kind of blackballed from the SEAL group, but his name is Eric Greitens, and he wrote a book called Resilience, and it's a really good book. The reason why I won't get into the reasons why he's not viewed well by his peers, but in that book, he was talking about helping one of his other buds training guys, and he asked a question that I asked the players. If you were to put these 3 things in order, what order would they be? And these 3 things are behaviors, feelings, or identity. What would be first for you? And I say that to the players, and a lot of people say, and it's probably a cyclical exercise, but in the book he talks about, if identity is the most important thing, because that leads to my behaviors, which creates my feelings. And I think it gets to your point, who do you want to be seen as? What's your identity? If you go out there with the identity of, I'm one of the best officials here, and you act that, even if you make a call that's incorrect, but you still have that attitude,
right,
that's important. Body language is an external expression of an internal thought. And when people are observing what goes on and they see that, they make judgment on that. And that it's a controllable, that's a controllable activity or controllable task that we can all take care of, is we can take care of our bodies and how we present and how we respond to things.
Good. All right. So I want to ask you about specifics of self-talk. So you've alluded to that a couple times. And, so here's 2 situations. One, I've got a game in a packed house. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot at stake. The externals say this is a really important game and I have to be ready. And I'm okay with my partners. I'm ready to go, but I know that we need to be really good tonight. The second scenario is I walk in and there's about 50 people in the gym, and towards the end of the season, the team's tired, and I'm not sure whether they really care or not. But gee, I've had to service the game. So from a standpoint of self-talk, how do I get, because we'd love to say ideally, look, we wanted you to give us the same game in both places.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me ask you, let me put it in a question.
Yeah.
What's the ultimate task of a basketball official?
Okay. It's to get the plays right and to manage the emotions of the game, and allow the athletes to express their abilities within the
Rob,
framework.
let me ask Rob, what's the ultimate task of an official?
I would say the ultimate task is to create a level playing field based upon our rules and guidelines. And as Ed says, there's a major focus on managing emotions and game management. But at the end of the day, I think, everybody just ultimately wants there to be an equal opportunity for each participant.
So if you remember that, do any of those external stimuli affect the task?
Yeah.
It shouldn't.
Huh?
It doesn't matter. That's what, so I asked the pitchers, what's the ultimate task of a pitcher? And they'll say to get outs or to win the game or to pitch deep in the game. And they're not wrong, but the ultimate task is to throw this pitch the best you can, regardless of inning count, score, last pitch, next pitch, venue, anything. That's the ultimate task. So the ultimate task of an official is to do his job, regardless of the environment that he's in. And that can happen. That's a perspective. It's not getting caught up in the increased excitement of a championship game or the flatness of a game with no one in the gym. The task doesn't change.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Okay. Now, I know, well, this kind of goes hand in hand with this. I know.
So Bob, may I interrupt real quick?
Yeah, please.
I just want to make sure what we heard there is that almost simplify our thoughts or simplify our task. Break it down to almost the simplest form.
Yeah. What's your job? When I was, so for example, I can make this, I'll just, having played high school basketball and watching college basketball, you can't say you're going to have a perfect 60-minute game in the first minute. You've got to call the first minute, and you don't have time to reflect, and you guys would have to help out. Basketball is such a fast, fluid game that you don't have a lot of time to think. You have to react. And and if you're thinking about the last call and the ball's going up court, you're going to miss the next call, right? The time that you can reflect on that is during a timeout or change of possession or something like that.
Right.
So, in knowing that, having developed some mental game routines, you can coach yourself during those moments that allow yourself not to revert back to that self-talk, the negative self-talk. And we're going in a little bit different direction. But essentially, simplicity is always the best thing. You have to build it, and pitching, you build it on one pitch at a time with the hope to go 9 innings. But you can't look at 9 innings before you've thrown the first pitch. And a basketball official can't hope to have a perfect game without calling the first play. And so it always comes back to the task at hand.
Good. Good example, Rob. Okay. So I want to just talk about the couple things here. Joe Madden talks about don't let the pressure become greater than the pleasure. So managing pressure, in our case, in the basketball official, sometimes it's self-imposed, and different people react differently. I see some people that flourish with pressure, other people will. Just how do we get to the point where the pleasure is greater than the pressure?
Well, again, it's perception of the situation, and it comes down to a little bit of self-image. Everyone talks about Derek Jeter or David Ortiz or even Michael Jordan for that matter. He's known for hitting all these big shots, but he talks about the ones that he missed that no one talks about. And the same thing in officiating is, again, the situation doesn't change the task. And the attitude of, this is, if you peel it all away, and it's a guy shooting a basketball in a gym. or someone defending a basketball in gym. And then we add on other players, the crowd, the excitement, the noise, the scoreboard, all this stuff. And that's what creates the pressure. It's focused on external factors. I think, one thing that would come to mind in training for officials, I wonder how many officials do imagery. How many officials imagine themselves being out on the court in those situations, just like a player would, playing the game in their mind, hearing the crowd, hearing the coach screaming at them, hearing the players, rehearsing those situations, is the best way to put yourself in them, because you're not always going to be in them in a natural sense, but you can rehearse those. That would be something that I think officials could do to improve their game and change their perspective of the pressure to just something that's, happening.
That could really come in a form of, we do a ton of video review, but that could also come in a form of attending games and sitting there and to kind of vicariously being connected, to the people that are out on the floor.
Yeah, watching the game from a perspective as an official, what it's like to be on the court, but then looking at it and creating those images in your mind. You can recall, I'm sure, Ed, you can recall times where you're on the court and these big guys are around you and the plays going on, and you can probably recall certain plays that happen in your mind. That's data that you have that you can recall anytime. And so the officials have all this data in their head of observing this firsthand that they can recall, replay, and then, and then make corrections on, if I'm throwing a changeup and I keep throwing bad changeups and I picture the good one and I feel what that's like and I see it, I can change my performance. So I think officials can do that too. Imagery is a very, very powerful tool when it comes to that.
Bob, question on that imagery.
Down in preparation is one thing that helped me on the mound was expecting that I was going to be challenged 3 different times during the game in which the outcome of the game was in the balance. And it could be the first inning, it could be the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, it could be the 6th, but they were coming. And when I did that, as a young pitcher, that would happen and I'd go, oh God, what do I do now? As a veteran pitcher, I would identify it as situation number 1. Oh, I knew I was going to have 3 of these. This is the first one. This is how I'll deal with it. And I think officials could also be prepared for those situations of, okay, this, in the scouting reports, this players can be, I know I'm going to hear it from this guy. I know I'm going to hear it from that guy. I know I'm going to make a mistake. Oh, I knew that mistake was coming. I'm not going to worry about it. So just, again, perspective of looking at things a little differently and not being so hard on yourself, but identifying the situations that maybe, that you're going to face that will help you face them in a little bit better light, I guess is a better word.
Okay.
Rob, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I have 2 questions for you. One, going back to the imagery. As officials, we have a lot of downtime. So do you find that there's a more relevant time to practice imagery on our own during the day? Is that something that, is there any relevance to what time that occurs, as opposed, like we're in the locker room 90 minutes before the game. And during that 90 minutes, we probably, half of that time is kind of our time to, personally ourselves, before we collectively get together with our group, and maybe for another 45 minutes we'll talk as a group. But during that time, is that
totally sure? Yeah, I think if you have consistent time allotted to you that is built into your routine, that would be a great time to do a 5-minute imagery on, seeing yourself on the court, seeing the plays happen, the colors of the uniforms, the personnel, the people that you may know, put yourself in that and just kind of play the game, let it go in your mind. So that would be one thing. The other thing would be keeping a personal journal. And I don't know the specifics. I know that, you probably do a lot of debriefing and there's some activities that happen on a regular basis, but to to just kind of evaluate yourself on things you did well, things you need to work on, because it's never perfect. But I think we minimize our successes and we maximize our failures, if you will. And we need to recognize the things that we've done well, and that can be an internal reflection by a post-game journal, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's really good. And the one thing I wanted to ask you too is, I think as officials we have an interesting dynamic compared to an athlete. You talked about Michael Jordan, Jeter, Ortiz, and you mentioned about, you know, that everybody wants to talk about their makes and nobody wants to talk about their misses. Well, with officials, it's completely the opposite.
Right.
So everybody wants to talk about our mistakes.
Yeah.
When we get plays right, you know, oh, that's what we're supposed to do. So I think that's a challenge mentally for us compared to athletes. And I just wanted to see if you had any suggestions on how to, you know, outside of, well, just flush out the outside noise. Well, that's easy to say, but.
No, it's really, well, I mean, yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's a great perspective on focusing on the mistakes and letting everyone let you know about those. Players also, you know, go through that, whether you make an error that lets the winning run in, or you give up a home run, or something like that happens. You have to have tough skin, which you guys, all basketball officials, I'm sure, learn that firsthand. You know, you have to be able to be not deal with all the BS and still do your job respectfully. But I think that, again, it's understanding that I'm just thinking about do you answer to the media after the games in which something like that happened? Do they go up to you and say, hey, you blew the call? You know, do you have to respond to the media? So
they have they'll send a pool reporter in. If it's something that is a rule situation or something that impacted the game, then the process is that that's the NBA thing in most Division I. They'll send a pool reporter in to ask the questions for everybody.
That may happen once a year.
Okay, so most of this is
most levels, yeah.
Yeah, so most of this is your internal dialogue of, I blew that call. That's self-criticism. That's beating yourself up, understanding that you're not perfect. So you could review the situation. You know, and then another question I'll use for that is 3 questions that I ask players if they had a situation in which they didn't perform well. And you guys can put this in basketball terms, but say there's a hitter up, there's a man on third base and there's less than 2 outs. All he's going to do is hit a fly ball and drive in the run. So he knows that, and he swings at a ball and pops it up in the infield. So the 3 questions are, number 1, what were you trying to do? Well, based on the situation, I was trying to hit a fly ball in the outfield to drive the run in. Question number 2 is, what went wrong? Well, what went wrong is I swung at a high pitch and I shouldn't have swung at that pitch. Number 3 is, what will you do next time? Next time, I'll make sure the ball's down in the zone so I can do that. So from a basketball official, I would ask yourself to give me an example of a situation in which you may have made a bad call, and then take me through, you know, what were you trying to do? Obviously, you get the call right, but identifying what went wrong, and then more importantly, what do I do now? So how would that work in a basketball setting?
Yeah. So that's a great question. That's the mistake recovery strategy that, you know, that we talk about, and it even goes back to the Longoria video where you find a way to breathe and you got to release it because you can't carry it, right?
Yeah.
And because our game, I mean, basketball is somewhat episodal. Even, I mean, baseball obviously much more so, but we do have episodal and breathing. I mean, I know that's a part of your book. You talk about breathing, and so kind of exhale and get it all out.
Well, I mean, I would think that that's hard to do during the game unless you're starting the second half or the start of the game or whatever. But Rob, I mean, to my point to the questions, I guess, you know, one thing I'm thinking of, I missed a call because I might have been in the wrong position.
Sure.
Or, you know, you didn't try to make the bad call, but what was the reason why you did? So can you give me an example of that scenario in a basketball sense? What might an official say?
A lot of times we see that if we're not disciplined in the lead position when plays come at us and we're quick with our whistle, we'll blow on contact that is marginal or legal, and we call it a defensive foul. And it's next thing you know, it's a block shot, and the ball should be going the other way, and now we have free throws here. So that happens quite a bit. And a lot of times, so we would answer the why question would be, I was too quick. I didn't see the whole play. I didn't allow myself to process the play. And,
and then what will you do next time?
Next time I would hope that I would be more processed and I would see with the play coming at me. Yeah.
Right. So that's implementing a strategy to prevent yourself from beating yourself up about something that happened. That allows you to move forward past the emotion of the call, the self-bashing of the negativity of a mistake, to something that's practical going forward. So that's just another strategy that's relatable, I think, in everything. And, I do it all the time in golf. Well, why'd you hit it? I hit it out of bounds. Why'd you do that? Because I was thinking, don't hit it out of bounds. Well, don't do that again.
Yeah. Okay. In the spirit of keeping this within on the framework of our attention span, I want to kind of wrap this up. And obviously, this could be another hour because the nuggets here are tremendous. But I'm going to really encourage our members to listen to this over again. I want to just close with this. So this kind of really hit me when I back reading your book. On page 124, that we only perform. Let me get this right. To the level of our self-image, how we see ourselves. And boy, I just think, Rob, and the basketball officiating, so many people would underachieve because they don't see themselves working where you are. Oh, well, that's good for him, or he knew somebody, and that happened this day. But I'm not. It all kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that we all face that as humans, whether it's, I'm not smart enough to go to college, or, we limit ourselves with things because that's kind of a human nature. There's a lot of reasons why that happens, but, changing the self-image is just like, I can do that, and really believing it. That's self-confidence. Confidence is doing something well that you can repeat over and over again, that you enjoy, and understanding that if you don't do it well one time doesn't mean you can't do it. And I think that's where the self-image comes in. Is I think people get to a certain point and then it's like, well, this guy's really good because he does that, but he doesn't know that guy thinks the same way he does, except for the fact that he believes he should be there. He still has the same worries about the game, about performance, about negativity, about making mistakes. But the bottom line is, I believe that I'm still good enough to be here. And that self-image can change. It takes time, but it definitely can change.
Rob, this is great stuff. We're going to wrap it up. I'm going to remind everybody, so the book is 90% mental. And we in the Rush household, we put this on every night.
Good, keep putting it on. We need as many wins as we can get.
We're hoping for great stuff in the stretch run. I know that with Bob's position as a mental skills coach with the Cubs, I'm sure that there's a lot of challenges. And you could probably write another book when this is all said and done. But thank you for taking time. I know you got a lot of stuff going on. And enjoy your time in Maine, and we'll reconnect with you in the near future.
I'd love that. It was a pleasure meeting you, and I probably watched a game in which you officiated probably more than once, and didn't know who you were. So it's nice to meet you. And Rob, nice to meet you, and continued success. And thanks for having me on the program.
Okay. All right.
Great. Thanks, Bob.